I want to take the time to share with you the district presentation given to other content PLCs on campus. Much of the work we've accomplished as a department this year is closely aligned to DDI as it will be implemented in Waco ISD, but there are some differences. For example, to promote student mastery and intervention, we'll be creating exit tickets with scripted exemplars rather than mastery quizzes. I prefer the mastery quiz model for several reasons, but I also appreciate the value of the exit ticket exemplars we'll talk about soon. For example, they do have the potential to really show students thinking more clearly than a mastery quiz, as long as the student attempts the task. Before we go on, this slide is intended to remind us that the preparation and planning we are accomplishing with these know and show documents and the exit ticket exemplars is action-oriented. In other words, it's meant to produce meaningful student work that we can discuss in a PLC or with an instructional leader during a focused data meeting. The end goal is to illuminate student misunderstandings so that we can provide effective interventions. We'll talk more about this later this year, hopefully. We already know that a lesson that is not aligned to the state standards or how students are assessed on these standards sets our kids up for failure. The goal of DDI is to ensure that what is being taught each day in our classrooms leads students to the understandings that are mapped out in the TEKS. That being said, DDI is very assessment oriented. It is a framework developed by Uncommon Schools and is meant to produce mastery on standardized tests. Part of aligning lessons to the science TEKS includes all the processing standards that are really only assessed on STAR and name only. Scientific reasoning and processes are skills that have to be practiced the same way you practice an instrument or a sport. They have to be done using inquiry activities or authentic labs, which goes beyond the scope of DDI in many ways. DDI, however, will be a way that we can ensure the content portions of our science lessons are well aligned. This chart just shows how the TEKS are broken down to learning objectives. Our daily lesson objectives will be based on our know and show documents. The TEKS are broken into strands. We know these as reporting categories. Each strand is broken down into standards, and each standard is broken down into student expectations. The SEs are what we commonly refer to as TEKS, but they are the last step of guidance the state gives before individual districts and campuses decide how to teach the content as they develop learning objectives. I do want to note that each part of the TEKS for each grade level includes an introduction to the scope of the course. If you've never read the introduction before, I encourage you to do so. It shares a bigger picture view of what is trying to be accomplished in each grade level. We've already discussed this idea. The goal of aligned lessons, exit ticket exemplars, student data, and DDI in general is to provide a definite path towards student mastery. In some ways, DDI may do this better than the mastery quiz system we use this year, and in other ways, it may be more cumbersome. This slide reminds us that we have to prioritize standards. There's too much to teach. Some standards might be prioritized because they are heavily tested and/or because they are supportive to the next grade level or vertically aligned. From this, we create a roadmap of the standards in the tested unit in order of importance. You'll see that some are more important than others, and we'll look at the priority ones first. There can also be non-assessed standards in a unit, but we're going to focus on the standards that are tested when we plan and have data meetings to assess student work. After the unit is planned, the idea is that we're going to look at our most recent assessment data as we teach. From there, we determine the standards where we didn't do as well and prioritize those standards to determine what and how we will reteach the whole class or through interventions like small group. We're planning on using several tools to plan our know and shows and create our exemplar tickets and evaluate student data. The first tool is the TEKS resource system. We've not used TEKS RS very much. Amy Heichel recently sent out an email. If you need a login or account reset, please notify her. The instructional focus document in TEKS RS will help you break down individual standards and student expectations. In many ways, it's similar to the Standards Unwrapped, Standards Correlation, and Teacher Background in the Essential tab in STEM Scopes that we've been using. which is another valuable resource. The IFD in STEM Scopes helps you identify implications for instruction and exactly what students must know and be able to do. Another tool that allows you to prioritize student expectations is the lead forward frequency distribution. It tells you how often the standards have been tested on STAR. Likewise, the lead forward snapshot for science helps you prioritize by showing which standards are readiness standards and which are supporting. We're all familiar with both of these lead forward documents, and they're included in your PLC binders. Lastly, lead forward items analysis tool gives us assessment items for exemplar exit tickets, which in turn inform our know and shows. STEM Scopes also is linked to these STAR assessment items, and if you're teaching a non-tested item in the 6th or 7th grade and wish to view assessment questions, these can be found in the Eduphoria test banks and TEKS-RS assessment generator. Some other things to determine priority standards, in addition to whether it's a readiness assessment or tested. One is the student expectation an endurance expectation, or does it provide students with knowledge and skills that will be bigger than a single day value? In other words, is it something that's really important aside from the test, a lifelong skill? Also, convergence. Are there SEs that will be of value in multiple disciplines or multiple standards? I often think of the processing standards in science for conversion. Scientific reasoning, the ability to reason logically or to generate and evaluate data. And also prior knowledge, that's our vertical alignment. Are there certain student expectations that will be leaned on heavily in high school science courses? We've been unpacking standards all year, and the process really hasn't changed. In order to interpret the standards, we have to articulate what students need to know and be able to do, and the key understandings they must show us for mastery. And we'll do this through a know and show and an exemplar exit ticket. The steps in breaking down a standard are listed here, including the know and show. After we've created a know and show, we'll solve an assessment item, making the note of the steps, and then we'll adjust our initial know and show document based on our experience in solving assessment items. Lastly, we'll try and sequence the list of know and show objectives in an order that leads to mastery, and hopefully we do this in a logical manner. Here's an example of a 3rd grade standard and the corresponding SE that goes with it. Number and operations. The TEK is the student applies mathematical process standards to develop and use strategies and methods for whole number computations in order to solve problems with efficiency and accuracy. The student is expected to, here's the SE, solve with fluency 1-step and 2-step problems involving addition and subtraction within 1,000 using strategies based on place value, properties of operations, and relationships between addition and subtraction. As it's broken down in the know and show document, try to sequence the skills that were listed in the SE in a logical progression from simple to complex. And you can see the example of how that's been done on the slide. A complete know and show for this SE using the tools that we've gone over and are listed might look like this. You may wish to review the math example that's linked in Trello. It is logically sequenced, succinct, and thorough. This is where we stopped in the process this year and launched into creating mastery quizzes for assessment. In the DDI framework, we look at assessment items first, work them out ourselves, and use this to inform and update the know and show document. This is an additional planning step that I felt was intuitive, like we already knew it, but that we need to begin to intentionally include now. Once the know and show is complete, we're almost ready to create daily learning objectives that are well aligned. First, we need to create assessments for each SE that are not only prove that the students know the concepts that we've taught, but hopefully also illuminate the process them as well. So here's another grade math TEK. Here's another third grade math TEK and the corresponding student expectation. Represent 1 and 2 step problems involving addition and subtraction of whole numbers to 1000 using pictorial models, number lines, and equations. In this step of planning, we'll use the release star item to create an exit ticket with an ideal scripted response and success criteria, which we can use to rate student responses as high, medium, or low. Here's an example for the third grade math TEK from the previous slide. Notice the success criteria and how the teacher has visibly done each bullet point in the scripted response. It may be helpful to look at the ELAR exemplar exit ticket as well, which is linked in Trello, in order to get an idea of how this is accomplished for items that are not clear-cut problem-solving items like this math TEK. In any event, the exemplar exit ticket should demonstrate full mastery of the assessment item. It should align to ideal exit ticket responses, illuminate work done to solve the problem as much as possible, and contain evidence of success criteria. In turn, the success criteria should be observable in the student's response. If you can't see it, it's not a good criteria. List the qualities that must be present in the student's response. Be in student-friendly language so that we can share the success criteria with our students, and align to the objective and exemplar response. So now it's time to get to work on our own know-and-shows and exemplars for the last content unit of the year. Links to each grade level document can be found in Trello. For exemplar responses, please work your own problem, the problem that your team selects for each student expectation, and then take a photo and upload it next to the success criteria in your know-and-show documents. I know that each grade level has set up their own weekly meeting time, and I encourage you to divide up work and then review and comment on each other's contributions in Google Docs. Happy planning, guys.